Here's a question that should keep you awake at night. How is it possible that in an era where you can instantly connect with anyone, anywhere, at any time, we're experiencing the highest rates of loneliness, depression, and social anxiety in recorded human history? How did the promise of infinite connection deliver us into an epidemic of isolation so severe that the Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health crisis equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day? This isn't just a technological glitch or an unfortunate side effect of progress. This is the predictable outcome of a systematic transformation of human connection into a commodity, where your most intimate needs for belonging and community have been captured, repackaged, and sold back to you as products designed not to satisfy those needs, but to perpetually intensify them. What you're experiencing isn't personal failure or generational weakness. You're living through the most sophisticated manipulation of human psychology ever devised, operating at a scale that would make Milton Friedman himself marvel at the efficiency of market forces in monetizing the deepest aspects of human nature. The data reveals the magnitude of this crisis with brutal clarity. Among adults aged 18 to 25, rates of major depression have increased by over 60% in the past decade, precisely the same period that social media adoption reached saturation. Anxiety disorders now affect over 40 million adults, with social anxiety specifically tripling among young people since 2000. Suicide rates have climbed by 35% since 1999, with the steepest increases occurring after 2007 when platforms like Facebook and Twitter achieved mass adoption. Meanwhile, the average person now spends over 7 hours daily staring at screens, checking their phone 96 times per day, while reporting fewer meaningful friendships and less community engagement than any previous generation. These aren't coincidences. They're the quantifiable results of applying free market principles to human attention, social validation, and emotional connection. When Milton Friedman argued that market mechanisms could efficiently allocate any resource, he likely never imagined that resource would be your psychological well-being, your sense of self-worth, and your capacity for genuine human intimacy. Yet that's exactly what happened when Silicon Valley entrepreneurs took his theories about rational choice and competitive efficiency and applied them to the most irrational, inefficient, and beautifully human aspects of our existence, our need to be seen, understood, and loved. I am going to reveal 8 systematic mechanisms through which the promises of digital connection have been weaponized against your mental health, transforming tools that were supposed to liberate you into systems of control more sophisticated than anything or will imagine. Each mechanism represents a direct application of neoliberal economic theory to human psychology, creating what appears to be freedom of choice while actually manufacturing dependence, isolation, and perpetual dissatisfaction. By the end, you'll understand not just why you feel more alone despite being more connected, but how to recognize and resist the systematic exploitation of your deepest human needs. The first mechanism is what I call the commodification of validation, and it represents perhaps the most elegant application of supply and demand economics to human psychology ever devised. Milton Friedman argued that free markets efficiently price goods based on their scarcity and demand. Social media platforms have taken this principle and applied it directly to human approval, creating artificial scarcity of validation while simultaneously increasing your demand for it. Consider how these platforms actually function. Every post, photo, story, or comment becomes a product launched into a market where your self-worth becomes the currency being traded. The number of likes, shares, comments, and reactions you receive serves as the market price for your social value on any given day. But here's the crucial manipulation. Unlike traditional markets where success creates satisfaction, these platforms are designed to ensure that no amount of validation ever feels sufficient. The algorithms deliberately create unpredictable reward schedules, sometimes flooding you with approval and sometimes withholding it completely, triggering the same psychological responses that make gambling addictive. Research from the University of Pennsylvania demonstrates that even moderate social media use significantly increases depression and loneliness within just 1 week. The study found that participants who limited social media to 30 minutes per day showed dramatic improvements in well-being, while control groups using platforms normally experienced measurable psychological deterioration. Neuroscientist Dr. Anna Lemp's research at Stanford reveals that social media triggers dopamine responses identical to cocaine, creating tolerance that requires ever-increasing amounts of digital interaction to achieve the same emotional satisfaction. Most tellingly, studies show that people report feeling lonelier immediately after sessions of high social media engagement, particularly when comparing their lives to the curated presentations of others. This isn't accidental. These platforms employ teams of neuroscientists, behavioral economists, and addiction specialists whose job is to identify the precise psychological vulnerability that keep you scrolling. They've weaponized what psychologists call intermittent variable reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes slot machines irresistible, to ensure that you never quite get enough validation to feel satisfied, but always get just enough to keep seeking more. Your loneliness isn't a bug in a system. It's the feature that drives engagement and generates revenue. The second mechanism operates through what I call relationship financialization, where human connections are subjected to the same market dynamics that Friedman championed for economic efficiency. Just as financial markets create complex instruments to trade risk and debt, digital platforms have created sophisticated systems for trading social capital, reducing your relationships to quantifiables that can be optimized, leveraged, and ultimately monetized. Think about how you actually interact with people on these platforms. Every relationship becomes a strategic calculation based on social media metrics. You don't just communicate with friends, you manage a portfolio of social connections, each with measurable returns in terms of likes, comments, visibility, and status enhancement. You curate your posts not based on authentic expression, but on algorithmic optimization, designed to maximize engagement from specific target audiences within your social. Your relationships become subject to the same performance pressures and competitive dynamics that Friedman argued would drive economic efficiency. The psychological impact of this financialization is devastating. Studies from the American Psychological Association show that people who view their social interactions through metrics-based frameworks report significantly lower relationship satisfaction and higher rates of social anxiety. When every interaction becomes a transaction evaluated through engagement data, authentic intimacy becomes impossible. You begin to view friends as audiences, conversations as content, and emotional support as a form of social currency that must be carefully managed to maintain your network value. Research from MIT reveals that people now spend more time managing their digital relationships than maintaining their real-world connections, yet report feeling less emotionally supported and understood than previous generations. The platforms have successfully transformed friendship from a source of mutual support into a competitive performance where everyone is simultaneously the product being marketed and the customer being sold to. This creates what sociologists call relation labor, where maintaining connections becomes work rather than joy, systematically draining the emotional energy that authentic relationships are supposed to provide. The third mechanism I call attention extraction economics, representing perhaps the purest application of Friedman's theories about resource allocation to human consciousness itself. Milton Friedman argued that markets efficiently allocate scarce resources to their highest value uses. Technology companies have taken this principle and applied it to your attention, treating your consciousness as a finite resource to be captured, refined, and sold to the highest bidder in advertising market. Your attention has become the crude oil of the digital economy, extracted through increasingly sophisticated techniques and refined into behavioral data that predicts and influences your future actions. The platforms don't sell social networking. They sell access to your attention, which they then subdivide and auction to advertisers in real-time markets worth hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Every moment you spend scrolling represents value being extracted from your conscious and converted into shareholder profits. The extraction process is scientifically designed to be irresistible. Research from the Center for Humane Technology reveals that platforms employ over 50 different psychological manipulation techniques, including social approval feedback loops, fear of missing out triggers, variable reward schedule, and social reciprocity obligations. These techniques create what tech insiders call persuasive design, essentially psychological warfare designed to capture and hold your attention against your conscious intention. Studies from Harvard Business School demonstrate that the average knowledge worker checks email every 6 minutes and switches between digital platforms every 19 seconds while online. This constant attention switching creates what neuroscientists call continuous partial attention, a state of chronic mental fragmentation that impairs deep thinking, emotional processing, and meaningful relationship formation. The cognitive cost of this attention extraction manifests as decreased ability to focus, increased anxiety when disconnected, and a persistent sense that life is happening somewhere else, just outside your current awareness. The economic incentives ensure that platforms maximize time spent, not user satisfaction or well-being. Facebook's own internal research, revealed in congressional testimony, showed that their algorithms amplify content that generates negative emotions because angry, anxious, and outraged users spend more time on the platform. Your emotional distress becomes their competitive advantage, creating systematic incentives to promote content that makes you feel worse about yourself and the world around you. The fourth mechanism operates through what I call community privatization, where traditional public spaces for social connection have been replaced by privately controlled digital environments designed to extract profit rather than foster genuine community. This represents a direct application of Friedman's privatization theories to human social infrastructure, with predictable consequences for collective well-being. Historically, communities formed around shared physical spaces, neighborhoods, schools, churches, community centers, town squares, and local businesses. These spaces were governed by social norms focused on mutual support, collective benefit, and long-term relationship building. The transition to digital platforms has privatized community formation, placing it under the control of corporations whose primary obligation is to shareholders, not community members. Unlike public spaces designed for human flourishing, digital platforms are optimized for engagement metrics that generate advertising revenue. This creates systematic distortions in how communities form and function online. Research from Georgetown University demonstrates that algorithm-driven content promotion amplifies the most emotionally provocative interactions while suppressing nuanced, thoughtful discussion that builds genuine understanding between people. Communities become battlegrounds for attention rather than spaces for mutual support. The privatization of community has eliminated what sociologists call weak-tie relations, the casual acquaintance with neighbors, shopkeepers, and community members that provide social support without intimate obligation. These relationships were crucial for mental health because they provided a sense of belonging and social integration without the performance pressures of close friendship. Digital platforms have replaced these low-stakes social connections with high-stakes social media interactions where every exchange is public, permanent, and potentially viral. Studies from the University of Chicago reveal that people living in communities with strong local social infrastructure, walkable neighborhoods, community centers, local businesses report significantly higher life satisfaction and lower rate depression than those whose social lives are primarily digital. The privatization of community doesn't just change how we connect. It fundamentally alters what connection means, transforming it from a public good into a private commodity. The fifth mechanism I call comparison economy amplification, where digital platforms have systematically industrialized the cyclical process of social comparison that drives human status anxiety. Milton Friedman argued that competition drives efficiency and innovation, but when applied to human self-worth, competitive dynamics create systematic psychological harm rather than beneficial outcomes. Social media platforms profit by creating what psychologists call compare and despair cycle, where your self-esteem becomes dependent on how your life measures up to carefully curated presentations of other people's experience. The platforms amplify comparison by making everyone's highlight reels visible simultaneously, creating an impossible standard where your everyday reality is measured against thousands of people's best moments. Research from the University of Pennsylvania shows that social comparison on digital platforms triggers the same brain regions associated with physical pain. When you see others' vacation photos, career achievements, relationship milestones, or life experience, your brain processes this as evidence of your own social inadequacy, regardless of your actual circumstances. The platforms exploit this psychological vulnerability by using algorithmic promotion to ensure you see content that triggers comparison responses, because envious users spend more time scrolling. The comparison economy is particularly destructive because it operates on false information. Studies demonstrate that people consistently overestimate others' happiness and success based on social media presentations while underestimating others' struggles and challenges. This creates what researchers call pluralistic ignorance, where everyone believes they're the only one struggling while everyone else is thriving, leading to systematic underestimation of the normalcy of human difficulty. Facebook's internal research revealed that their platform makes body image issues worse for teenage girls, increases political polarization, and amplifies mental health problems across all demographics. Despite knowing these harms, the company chose to prioritize engagement metrics over user well-being, because comparison-driven anxiety keeps people scrolling. Your insecurity becomes their market advantage, creating systematic incentives to promote content that makes you feel inadequate compared to others. The sixth mechanism operates through what I call temporal displacement economics, where digital platforms systematically extract you from present moment experience and redirect your attention toward past and future anxiety that generate more engagement but less life satisfaction. This represents an application of Friedman's efficiency theories to human consciousness that proves catastrophically inefficient to health. Digital platforms profit by creating what psychologists call continuous future shock, where your attention is constantly directed toward new information, potential threats, emerging trends, and future possibilities rather than present moment experience. The news feeds, notifications, alerts, and algorithmic recommendations create a state of perpetual anticipation that prevents the deep presence required for satisfaction, contentment, and genuine connection. Research from the University of California, Berkeley demonstrates that people who spend significant time on social media show decreased ability to experience what psychologists call savoring the capacity to fully appreciate positive experiences. Instead of enjoying present moments, heavy social media users develop what researchers call experiential avoidance, constantly seeking new stimulation to escape the anxiety created by previous digital interaction. The temporal displacement operates through carefully designed psychological triggers. Platforms use push notification, red badges, infinite scroll, and variable reward schedules to create what neuroscientists call continuous partial attention, where you're always mentally preparing for the next digital interaction rather than fully experiencing your current situation. Studies show that even having a smartphone visible reduces cognitive performance and relationship satisfaction, even when the device is turned off. The economic incentives ensure that platforms maximize what tech companies call time on platform rather than quality of experience while using the platform. Internal documents from major tech companies reveal they measure success through engagement duration and frequency, not user satisfaction or well-being. This creates systematic incentives to design features that increase anxiety about missing information, falling behind socially, or losing status within digital communities. The seventh mechanism I call emotional labor automation, where genuine human empathy and emotional support have been replaced by algorithmic systems designed to simulate care while extracting data and generating revenue. This represents perhaps the most insidious application of Friedman's market efficiency theories to human emotional needs. Traditional emotional support operated through reciprocal relations where people provided mutual care, understanding, and validation based on genuine concern for each other's well-being. Digital platforms have automated this process, replacing human empathy with algorithmic responses designed to keep users engaged rather than actually address their emotional needs. Consider how emotional expression actually functions on these platforms. When you share struggles, celebrations, or vulnerable moments, the responses you receive are shaped more by algorithmic promotion than genuine human connection. The platforms determine who sees your posts, in what order, and with what contextual framing, essentially controlling the emotional feedback you receive from your own social network. Research from Stanford University reveals that people increasingly turn to digital platforms for emotional support during crisis moments, but report feeling less understood and more isolated after these interactions compared to face-to-face emotional support. The platforms provide the illusion of care through likes, heart reactions, and brief comments, but lack the sustained attention, physical presence, and genuine empathy required for actual emotional healing. The automation of emotional labor creates what psychologists call empathy atrophy, where people lose the skills required for providing and receiving genuine emotional support. Studies show that heavy social media users develop decreased ability to read facial expression, interpret emotional cues, and provide appropriate responses to others' emotional needs. The convenience of digital emotional expression systematically undermines the human capacities required for authentic intimacy. The eighth and final mechanism operates through what I call agency illusion architecture, where platforms create the appearance of infinite choice and personal control while actually constraining your options to those that generate maximum profit for platform owners. This represents the culmination of Friedman's theories about individual freedom through market choice, revealing how the illusion of choice can become a sophisticated form of control. You believe you are freely choosing what to read, watch, share, and engage with, but your choices are actually being shaped by algorithmic systems designed to predict and influence your behavior in ways that maximize advertising revenue. The platforms present this as personalization and convenience, but research reveals it's actually a sophisticated form of behavioral modification that constrains your agency while maintaining the illusion of freedom. Studies from Northwestern University demonstrate that algorithmic content curation creates what researchers call filter bubbles and echo chambers that systematically narrow your exposure to information, perspectives, and experience. Rather than expanding your choices, the platforms increasingly show you variations of content you've previously engaged with, creating a sophisticated form of cognitive imprisonment disguised as customization. The agency illusion operates by giving you meaningless micro-choices: which posts to like, which videos to watch, which people to follow, while constraining the macro-choices that actually determine your experience. You can choose between thousands of pieces of content, but you cannot choose to see content that doesn't serve advertising interests, to interact with algorithms that prioritize your well-being, or to participate in digital communities designed for human flourishing rather than profit extraction. Facebook's internal research revealed that their algorithms can predict and influence user behavior with accuracy rates exceeding 90%, essentially turning personal choice into predetermined outcomes shaped by corporate interest. The platforms have successfully created what behavioral economists call choice architecture, that maintains the appearance of freedom while systematically directing behavior toward outcomes that serve platform profits rather than user well-being. Now that you understand these 8 mechanisms, the solution becomes clear. This isn't about individual willpower or personal responsibility. You're not failing to use technology correctly. You're successfully being used by technology designed to exploit your psychological vulnerabilities for profit. The loneliness you feel despite constant connection isn't a personal failing. It's the predictable result of systematic manipulation designed to monetize your deepest human needs. Recognition of these mechanisms is the first step toward reclaiming your agency. Once you understand that your loneliness is manufactured, your anxiety is engineered, and your dissatisfaction is designed, you can begin to make genuinely free choices about how you engage with digital technology. The platforms work by keeping these mechanisms invisible, operating below the level of conscious awareness. Awareness itself becomes a form of resistance. The path forward requires what I call intentional disconnection, not avoiding technology, but using it in ways that serve your actual needs rather than platform profit motives. This means establishing boundaries around when, how, and why you engage with digital platforms. It means prioritizing face-to-face interaction, cultivating offline communities, and developing the capacity for sustained attention and genuine presence. Research consistently shows that people who implement even modest restrictions on social media use experienced significant improvements in mental health within days. The solution isn't to abandon digital connection entirely, but to recognize that authentic human connection requires protection from systems designed to exploit it. Your loneliness isn't inevitable. It's imposed. Your isolation isn't natural. It's manufactured. Your anxiety isn't personal. It's systematic. The choice is now yours. You can continue participating in systems that profit from your suffering, or you can begin the work of reclaiming your attention, your relationship, and your agency from platforms designed to extract rather than serve. The mechanisms I've revealed operate only as long as they remain invisible. Once you see them clearly, you can no longer be unconsciously controlled by them. The generation that is more connected yet more alone than ever doesn't have to remain trapped in this paradox. Understanding is the beginning of liberation. Awareness is the foundation of genuine choice. Your recognition of these mechanisms is the first step toward the authentic connection you've been seeking all along.